downtown Simferopol, Crimea, getting ready for this fabulous May Day parade. It's unbelievable. Thousands and thousands of people here in all kinds of costumes. 175 ethnicities in Crimea working and living together. People are happy. They're happy that in 2014 they voted to return to Russia. Crimea was historically all the way back to the late 1700s. Crimea was part of Russia, and they're happy to be part of Russia now. Their people are wonderful, they're kind, a great sense of humor, the food is fantastic, and we're just proud to be here.
Russia, Vladimir Putin, Russia hates Russia, Putin, Russia, Moscow, Russia, Russian, pro-Russian, Russian, the Russians, Russian, Moscow, Russia, Putin, Russian against us. So Russia,
Putin despises the West in general and the United States in particular, the Soviet Empire. Russia. They're the adversary. They want to bring us down, the Soviet Union.
Russia.
Undermine the West, Soviet communists on the left.
Russia. That does it for us tonight. We will see you again tomorrow.
The demonization of Russia that goes on a nightly basis on cable news is so disturbing. It's so reminiscent of what we were doing about Iraq and Saddam Hussein before we invaded in 2003, before the shock and awe campaign. I'm terribly frightened. I don't know what the agenda is of those who are stimulating fear. So I needed to come here, number one, to show to America, fear not. But also, number two, to sort of get an understanding myself, meet the people here who live in this country that are going to be the recipients of any danger that occurs because of the fear-mongering that's happening.
I grew up being afraid of Russia or the USSR and Cuba. I went to Cuba twice. Now I've finally realized the dream of coming to Russia. I worked as a civilian employee in the Navy's Trident missile ICBM project management office. I know the capability of these weapons, and anything I can do to help turn that around, I will do. And I feel this trip was a big part of that, and Global Network is about being against the weaponization of space, and that's what missiles are. I tend to see it as people of Russia, people of the US, every nation, and then the governments of those nations. And I feel that's where the problems lie. And I actually understand why the Russian people are afraid of the United States government after having been here and looking at the perspective of the United States attacking. And I wish we would de-escalate so the Russian people or the government wouldn't be so afraid, and then we wouldn't have to be so afraid, is the way I see it.
So I've learned that we need to, that we have so much in common. And I've also learned about the partnership between my country and Russia that was strong and healthy and effective in the middle of the 20th century. And I learned about the proper pride that the people of Russia have and for their efforts and their commitment and the cost of the conflict of the Second World War to them. I've also just learned what a beautiful, beautiful place this is, from Sevastopol to St. Petersburg.
I think what I've mostly got from this is how incredibly already kind of infiltrated, if you like, is Western culture in this country. Our meetings and our walking around Moscow and here now in St. Petersburg, it's just like any other city in Europe. We have all of the same kind of shops. We seem to have the same aspirations of the people. whether that's good or bad. I mean, Russia is basically a capitalist state. So why should it be threatening other capitalist states? Maybe for markets, okay, you can understand that, but there's no reason why Russia would want to send troops into anywhere in Europe, really. We heard also the story about Crimea and the Ukraine while we've been here, and how those stories don't match at all with the stories that we've been given by our government and through our media. In the case of Crimea, they were extremely worried about what was going to happen to their part of the world, that little kind of peninsula that has a strong Russian history and culture associated with it. And what was happening in Ukraine at the time was that there was a right-wing takeover of the government. There was a clash of all kinds of things going on inside the country, but also helped by outside forces, mainly from the US, I guess. And the place was becoming like a bomb site. They didn't want that to happen to their part of the world. And so they voted almost a very high level of acceptance of the idea that they should rejoin with Russia. And that's what happened. There were no troops involved, there was no invasion, there was nothing like that at all. The people decided they wanted to go to Russia, to be part of Russia once again. And that's what's happened. And Russia has aided them since then. They built the infrastructure up, whereas when they were in the Ukraine, it was crumbling. It was very poor, devastating, really. Again, to their sort of their beliefs of themselves were starting to disappear, I think. And now they've been able to rebuild much of that under Russian help, with Russian help. So I would like certainly the Crimea to be recognized as being part of Russia, for sanctions to be lifted so that it can enjoy the freedom to develop as it wishes.
Well, we came to Russia on this global network study tour primarily because we've seen all this demonization of Putin and Russia, the people of Russia. So we want to come and listen and learn, see for ourselves. I like to say, pick the forbidden fruit, and then return home and share what we have learned with people. And it's really been a really remarkable journey. We began in Moscow, and then we went to Crimea, went to 3 cities in Crimea, Simferopol, Yalta, and Sevastopol. And then we've come here where we are now in St. Petersburg. Altogether about 2 weeks. 24 people began the trip. Not everybody, that was in Moscow, we had 24 people there, and then a few people didn't keep going on the other cities. So now we're down to about 18 people. And it's been really remarkable. Everybody has really enjoyed the hotels that we've been in. The staff has been unlike anything we've seen in any American hotel. People are really helpful. I love this story. Yesterday, one of our people, John Schuchard, a member of Veterans for Peace, his tooth broke off. And so they got an appointment for him immediately. The staff from the hotel walked him to the dentist's office. Cost $35 to fix his broken tooth. And when he was left, he got hugs from the dentist and the assistant dentist. So, you know, this kind of stuff we've just seen repeatedly. The people are really wonderful and kind. And a lot of times they don't even know what country you're from. So it's not like, oh, they're trying to impress the Americans. But they're just nice to us because that's the way they are. And then they later find out, oh, you're from America, you know. So it's been really, really amazing. And we're learning a lot about Russian history. Russia has such a long, long history. Yesterday we learned that Russia's been invaded by Sweden like 40-some times. They were invaded by Napoleon. They were invaded by Hitler's Nazis during World War II. And more than 28 million Soviet citizens were killed during that Nazi invasion and occupation. When we were in Crimea, we went to this museum called the 35th Battery, right on the coast, right on a cliff. And this was a place where the Russians, the Soviet Army, Navy had set up artillery batteries to fire against German fascist Navy. And as the Nazis took control of Crimea and especially Sevastopol, where the Russian Navy was based, their sailors and soldiers retreated to this 35th Battery that had an underground tunnel and everything else. In the end, more than 30,000 of these Soviet military people were killed by the Nazis as they came upon this place. And so they've created this amazing museum to remember the spirit, the souls of these Russian soldiers that were killed during that time. It was, I would say, one of the top 2 or 3 museums I've ever experienced in my entire life. And it was not about glorification of war in any kind of way, but it was really to remember the people, you know, and the guide even said this to us, which totally blew me away. Not all of these soldiers and sailors who died were heroes. They were just people. They were just people like you and me. In America, we hear that every soldier is a hero. You know, every returning Iraq and Afghanistan veteran is a hero. But, you know, but we know that's not true. So it's really just, there's a whole different world here that few people have ever really experienced. And I'm so happy we came. And everybody is thrilled we came, and was really, really very touched by the experience.
The Maine USA chapter of Veterans for Peace and the Komi Russia chapter of Veterans for Peace Statement of Solidarity. It's quite long, so I'm just going to read the first paragraph. In the spirit of world peace, with great respect for each other's efforts to forge a working relationship of nonviolence, we veterans of the 2 of the world's armies declare the following, and there's a list of how we're going to work together and support each other for peaceful coexistence in the world.
Ну что, еще раз благодарю за внимание.
One more time, I'm very grateful for your attention.
Мы рады, что наконец после долгого
I'm
перерыва
very glad that after long break
мы встретились опять с ветеранами за мир.
we could meet again veterans for peace.
Воочию.
Say, face to face, we could meet these people.
И в это неспокойное время
And in this disturbing time,
начинаем предпринимать практические шаги
to take the practical steps
в вопросах
into the issues,
борьбы за мир.
the struggle for peace.
Спасибо.
Thank you very much.